Welcome to the convention 2022, War Making to Peace Seeking. It's been another enormous effort to organize this thing and to get another convention off the ground. We have, I think, like 24, 26 individual programs throughout the convention. So it's going to be a pretty amazing one. We have three really good organized plenaries, one immediately following this on GI resistance, and that extends to other violent apparatuses of the state, which involve border patrol and the intersections of law enforcement and militarism. We can look at that and look at the resistance of that. Well, Jeff, if you want to introduce the next panel, and Steph, our moderator, we could get going.
All right. So during the 1991 Gulf War, about 100 military service members publicly spoke out against increased U.S. intervention in the Middle East. And we know how that turned out, not very well. Many of us refused to fight and went to prison. Steph Atkinson and myself were a couple of those objectors back then. Like myself, Steph was briefly incarcerated and discharged from the military with an other than honorable discharge. But the question is, what has she done lately? Steph has been active with Veterans for Peace, Chapter 92 in Seattle, where she visits public high schools to promote truth in recruiting. And earlier this month, she was proudly arrested with other VFP members in DC to bring awareness to the Pentagon's contribution to climate destruction. Steph and I run the monthly VFP GI Resistance Working Group meetings hosted by Courage to Resist. Courage to Resist has been active for 15 years, concretely aiding resistors, raising millions of dollars to provide direct legal and material support to people of conscience. And we've done so, and we do so today in collaboration with the Center on Conscience and War, the Military Law Task Force of the NLG, and the GI Rights Hotline. So if you're moved by the courageous individuals you're about to hear from today, join us every second Wednesday for the GI Resistance Working Group. And I will now turn it over to my comrade, Steph Atkinson.
Thank you, Jeff. Hi, everyone. I want to say that I'm super honored to moderate this panel today. I've met a group of people who are my new heroes, and we're going to talk about resistance. Everyone on this panel has resisted in a variety of ways. Either by filing for conscientious objector status. Some people have become whistleblowers. Some people are actually still serving. If you have not read their biographies, I will briefly introduce our panelists. I'm just going to start with names that I see. As I call your name, please chime in. Captain Alan Kennedy. Hello. Captain Kennedy is in the Army Reserves as we speak, and he has been on our podcast talking about his work with GI freedom of speech issues regarding demonstrations. He'll tell us more. I would like to introduce you to Jen Budd. Come on down, Jen. Jen is a former border security. All of your questions about what's going on down south, she's got a lot to tell you. I would also like to introduce Kyle Toon. Kyle? Show us, handsome guy. Hello. Kyle Toon just received conscientious objector status and is currently waiting discharge. Rosa Del Duca. Hello. Also, are you a conscientious objector? What makes a conscientious objector? Does somebody else saying that you're a conscientious objector make it so? Or is it something that you know in your heart? Is that everyone here with us for our panel? We were expecting one more panelist, and I hope that we could see Reality Winner might be joining us soon. The first thing I want to ask my outstanding friends is, what motivated you to join the military? Alan Kennedy, I know this answer and I'd like you to tell our friends.
Thank you. It's an honor to be with you. Thanks so much for inviting me to be here, Veterans for Peace. I've also had support from Courage to Resist, and one of my attorneys, James Branham, is with the National Lawyers Guild Military Law Task Force. So I joined the military because I was inspired to fight fascism by my great uncle Milt, who was a member of the Abraham Lincoln Brigade fighting Franco in Spain and Hitler in Germany, and then was promptly labeled a premature anti-fascist by the United States government when he returned home. And so I think to me that was what inspired me to join. And then I think my military service has gone in some interesting directions ever since.
Rosa?
Hi, thanks for having me. I joined mainly to pay for college, and I joined when I was 17. This was the year 2000, so year before 9/11. And in Montana, National Guard was known for, if they got called up at all, being a support force to fight fires, which I thought would be cool. But mainly, I was just really searching for a way to pay for school, and my mom had warned me, she'd been on and off welfare and had to declare bankruptcy the past year because our evil stepfather racked up all this credit card debt. And then he'd filed for bankruptcy. And so it was on her. And she was just letting me know, every couple months, like, hey, I can't help you. And so I tuned out all the other recruiters when they came through our little high school. But when the National Guard guy came through and said, 75% of your tuition paid for, 1 weekend a month, I did the math. I was like, 90% civilian, 10% soldier. I get to go to college, sign me up. That's why I joined.
You're not alone there. Kyle?
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's an honor and a privilege to be on this panel. I joined very similar to Rosa as far as the age. I was 17 years old when I signed my contract, and the main thing that motivated me at the time was that I had aspirations of being a writer and an actor, and at that time, it was made known to me that it wasn't realistic. And so the next best thing that was proposed to me was to follow the footsteps of my brother, who served 5 years, my uncle, who served in Vietnam twice, and my grandfather, who served in World War II and received a Purple Heart. So once my actual dreams were kind of debunked, and I kind of looked at those three individuals as examples of bravery and courage. And I wanted to see if I could be as brave and as courageous as them.
Jen Budd, tell me about what makes a woman go beyond Border Patrol?
I needed a job. Graduated from Auburn University in December of 1993 with honors and highest in my class. And I had come from quite a violent and alcoholic, abusive family. And after graduation and going back home, I realized that that environment was really, not conducive to a healthy lifestyle. And somebody said the Border Patrol was hiring, and I, from Alabama, back then had no idea what it was. This is before the internet, and I joined it and just thought it sounded like an adventure. So I wanted to serve my country.
Yeah, I feel connections to everyone for something they said is, there's your dreams, hopes, and aspirations, and then there's the fiscal reality. And if you're also in an unstable home environment, it's a means of escape. There's lots and lots and lots of reasons why people enlist. And I want to emphasize that today's all volunteer force, volunteer is a pretty broad word, depending on where you are in the hierarchy of how many assets do you have? How wealthy are you? If you have lots of choices and a lot of privilege, being a member of the all volunteer force is probably not on your radar. For everybody else who's not in that, this is a reality for us. And I want to ask you all, during your time in service, where you had a sort of turning point, some of the things that affected you in forming your conscience and encouraging you to act on your conscience. Was there a specific point? Was it a gradual build? What were the experiences that you've had or are having that encouraged you to act on your conscience?
I can go first, Steph. Yeah, this is a very good question. Very insightful too. And so it was a build. It was a progressive build. I remember being in basic training, and we're doing marksmanship. We're doing the marksmanship training, and I just remember just being so uncomfortable, not really. I guess, eating from the same plate that everybody was, as far as, the mantras and the mottos, the shoot to kill, the whole indoctrination and the institutionalization of civilian to soldier. That never really set with me. I mean, I'm 18 years old. I had no idea what I'm into, what I'm going into, and I have no idea how to process that. And then just my deployments to Afghanistan, I'm intelligence by trade, and so my contributions as far as intelligence and providing information for them to act on, I never walked away from that with a sense of accomplishment. I've always walked away from it knowing that someone was getting hurt because of the intelligence that I'm gathering. And then just recently, I deployed again in 2019 as a warrant officer. And here I am orchestrating the platform that collects the information and generates the reporting and sends out the soldiers to get the information to provide to the Department of Defense. And every single day, I needed to cleanse and purify myself. By myself in the office. Meditation, that was something that was talked about earlier. Meditation, that's when I picked up meditation. That's where I picked up being more, prayer and mindfulness and, mantra meditation, etc. So it was a gradual build. And I think what really tipped the boat over was in 2020, the murder of George Floyd. When to see someone that looked like me, and mind you, that wasn't the first time, and so, but to see that in rare form, to have that front row view of it, that really made me look at the fragility of life and ask myself, what am I doing, and why am I continuously exasperating the misery and the dread and the psychological tension that I was experiencing? I'm trying to balance two worlds, the world of trying to be aware and spiritually inclined, and then the other side is the officer, the intelligence technician, the soldier, the mentor. And so it was a gradual build, but that's what really made me want to take that leap and put in my conscientious objection packet was the 2020 slaying of George Floyd.
Rosa, I wonder if you would talk a little bit about following
Sure.
on Kyle.
Yeah, mine was pretty slow and gradual too. Like I had misgivings from the start in a way, the culture shock of boot camp and screaming about blood making the grass grow green, and all that stuff. And your recruiter, when at least then as a woman, my recruiter told me, oh, you're female, you'll never be on the front lines, and you won't ever be in the infantry. You show up to boot camp and day one, they're like, everyone's an infantry soldier first. duh. And then, you're looking down the firing lane at the human shaped torsos that you're supposed to blast in the head. So yeah, so I had misgivings early on, and yeah, knew that I didn't really fit, but I could play this game, and I really liked the physical challenges and trying to prove myself strong and tough and all that stuff. But I really credit journalism with my shift, because I wanted to be a writer too, like Kyle, and I knew that I wanted to be a journalist and also be a writer, like fiction and nonfiction. And so I signed up for a journalism program. And so as 9/11 happened and the war on terror unfolded, I was paying attention. I was reading the newspaper, I was watching TV, I was listening to the radio, listened to a lot of NPR. And I ended up moving from Montana to California and getting involved in the campus radio station. And I remember that Amy Goodman with Democracy Now!, she gave our little radio station like a year of her program for free. And I was the student journalism news director for the little station. So I was in charge of getting her program and putting it on the air. And so that's what I was listening to almost on a daily basis. And then I got an internship at the news talk station in town, which played Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity back to back. So I was in the middle and was paying attention to these very polar opposite viewpoints and perspectives and the guests and everything on them. And Amy Goodman had people who were going AWOL because of what they were seeing and experiencing. And she had the people begging for body armor and stuff. And Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity were talking about feminazis and just lauding Bush. And at that point, I found him as a clear war criminal and did not understand how the heck everyone was just going along with this. So yeah, once I got into journalism and started listening more and being more and more informed, that I realized, oh, you're a conscientious objector, and you are not in the right place. And yeah, at a certain point, I couldn't deal with the idea of me having any part in it. Yeah, I'll just let someone else go now.
Jen Budd, slightly different experience, not the battlefield, but actually probably more realistically, it is the battlefield. If you would tell us a little bit about your experience and your transformation, please.
I would say it's a different kind of battlefield for sure, but like everybody else so far has said, it was a progression, and I think that the first little things were how they separated the men and women in the beginning of the academy, so that the women didn't belong and that we couldn't make it, and that we would file fake sexual assault cases against the men so that the border patrol would somehow pass us or something. And then I was raped in the academy by a classmate, and they covered it up. And I think for me, and I don't know about everybody else, but when I entered, I was 24, and I think the concept of systemic corruption and abuse is not well taught in American culture and in our basic schools and so forth. And so it took me a while to understand that this is a system, that it's been built like this, it's designed like this. And then frankly, getting out to the border, I just, I knew a lot about the civil rights movement of the 60s in the South, because that's where I was raised, but I didn't know anything about what was going on the Southwest border. And I didn't know anything about how unjust a lot of the laws were. So that took a lot of time to understand that. And as Operation Gatekeeper came along and we became more and more militarized and less of a, not that we were ever a humanitarian group, but it's like the trainees coming out of the academy were becoming harder hardened to migrants, plights, and so forth, and the brutality and the death that we constantly saw. And that's not to say that what I went through as an agent was worse than somebody who's crossing the border and dies out there. That's not the case. But at some point, I came to the realization that I'm enforcing laws that's killing people. And I tried to get away from that after a month-long detail in India, where it was a very horrific and brutal month, where there was a lot of death, a lot of really violent death that I witnessed, and then I decided I wanted to go into intelligence. I went into intelligence, and I thought, okay, here I can do some good. But again, in intelligence, it's like the boss of my old station is the one smuggling drugs into the county. And so I go after them and they try and cover it up. So I'm whistleblowing and whistleblowing and whistleblowing. And each time they cover up until finally it gets to the point where they physically threaten my life. And this boss of the station says, we're not going to miss next time when we shoot at you out in the field. And so you either take the promotion and shut your mouth, which they offer me, or you try and stay alive again. You made it this night, you're not going to make it another night. So that was kind of the final straw for me. But as far as really coming to terms with my own actions, my own prejudice, and my own racism, and trying to understand that, and what I had enforced and done as an agent and contributed to that oppression and that dehumanization and so forth, that took many years, and that honestly took a massive suicide attempt and coming to terms with my own actions and being really honest with myself.
Before we proceed any further, I just want to take a few seconds and say I'm deeply moved by what you've just shared with us, and I can't even begin to understand what you've experienced. And I'm sorry those things happened to you. And it takes a lot of courage to talk about that.
It's okay that those things happened to me. They've made them who made me who I am today. And so it's okay.
Thank you. Alan, can you tell us what it's like to be a captain in the Army right now and reconciling these two things? You're obviously still serving and intend to continue to serve. And I would like you to tell us a little bit about that, please. Knowing that Alan does not represent the DoD with his comments here, just in case y'all are listening.
That's right. Yeah, that was a point of contention in court, whether anyone was ever confused, did anyone ever think that I was speaking for the Department of Defense? I doubt it, but I don't. So I've been in the Army for 10 years now, part-time, National Guard in the Colorado National Guard, and then now in the Army Reserve. And so, like Kyle, I was moved to resist by the murder of George Floyd. Like millions of others, I protested in the streets peacefully, and that was a meaningful, I think, enormous social movement to try to protest systemic racism, which exists in this country and has existed for hundreds of years. And like many others, the peaceful march that I participated in on May 30th, 2020, began peacefully and ended with the police firing clouds of tear gas at thousands of peaceful marchers, many of whom were just kids. And so I wrote an op-ed in the Denver Post, criticizing the police for violating our constitutional rights and for tear gassing everyone. And that same day, the Colorado National Guard launched an investigation. From there, they did at least 3 investigations. a local reprimand followed by a general officer memorandum of reprimand and 2 negative evaluations, tried to block my promotion, and a number of other things against me in violation of the First Amendment to the Constitution. And so we sued them in federal court. And so I'm very proud of that. I'll leave it at that, except to say that I think my mission has become to make the Army constitutional again, if that's possible.
Thank you for that response. Making it constitutional again, if that's possible. Yeah, the UCMJ, Uniform Code of Military Justice. I think just about everybody in here has had some sort of experience with that. Would you, I want to ask about hindsight, what we know now, and what we did then. And Jen, you said that, yeah, things happen to us, and that's what makes us who we are. And I agree with you on that. But also, I know when I asked Rosie about this, it's like, heck no, I wouldn't do that again. Are you kidding me? So let's talk about if you were at that point again, where you're thinking about enlistment and things, or just your process, things you would have done differently. Any reflections on that?
I think I could say for sure, like, if I had hindsight and I could, I know what we know today about the Border Patrol, and the press had actually reported on it enough, and let's say there was an internet back then that I could easily access instead of going to the library. No, I wouldn't have entered. But I would have preferred to probably have gone to law school. That was my goals. I wanted to be a civil rights attorney. And then I fell into this Border Patrol thing, and what I found, but then again I go back, because I found that the trauma that I had endured in my childhood, and then trying to survive the Border Patrol and trying to prove that I was a good agent, because it wasn't just that I'm sexually assaulted and raped. I complained about it and had the nerve to try and file a complaint. And so from then on, my entire career there, I was harassed constantly because of that. I was known constantly as a whistleblower. And I was run over by another agent on purpose at the station for talking about it. And I was shot at and stuff. But at the same time, I had a lot of anger, and especially after the sexual assault, and just trying to survive and prove myself. And I kind of think I needed to go through a lot of that. I think I needed my suicide attempt. I think I needed all of that, because my soul, my brain, my heart was just constantly in this fight or flight mode, being an agent and stuff. And I just really needed something to reset myself. And unfortunately for me, that's what it took. I wish I didn't end up with, like, my hands are disabled because of my suicide attempt. And I wish a lot of things, but I think if knowing what I know now, no, I wouldn't have made the choice, but at the same time, I'm glad I did. So it's complicated.
Rosa, will you tell me about your feelings about this?
Yeah, I guess, if I really could go back in time, I'd find myself in my dorky, I had like Star Wars collage all over my bedroom in high school, and I would find myself and slam her up against the wall and be like, do not do what you're thinking of doing tomorrow, night before going to MEPS or something. But more practically, I just I wish that teens now would wait until they're at least a year out of high school. I think it is ridiculous and criminal and incredibly immoral that we allow 17-year-olds and 18-year-olds to sign an 8-year legally binding contract with the military. And so I wish I just would have gone to a year of college. I could have gotten any kind of part-time job. And yeah, someone's saying rebel scum. And I could have paid for college without selling my soul and ethics and having anything to do with it. But then again, yeah, I mean, wouldn't that be nice if you had just not done this at this point and not done this at this point? I waited so long to act on my feelings because I was so alone. Like no one around me in the military had ever voiced anything like a misgiving or anything that I was thinking about or feeling. And I asked point blank at one point, I ended up joining ROTC at when I was in college to delay going over to being deployed because I was like, well, I can do an 18-month deployment and maybe like go insane, or I could join ROTC and at least finish college and maybe the wars will be over by the time So I ended up joining ROTC and that just made everything worse. And I was just, I waited so long that by the time I started my CO case, I think they, kind of used that against me. And so, yeah, I guess I would have acted on my instincts sooner. And I also think that it's criminal that we don't tell soldiers their rights right off the bat. Like in boot camp, I remember there was a kid on the bleachers. I had gone on sick call for some reason, and he said that he was going home, and we were all shocked. We were like, what? Like, you can't just leave. He's like, yeah, I said I refuse to train. I refuse to train for 3 days and I'm going home. This bullshit isn't for me. And you learned years later that, oh, that's something you can do. Entry level separation is a right that you have. If you are having huge misgivings and doubts in boot camp, you can do that. And that's kind of the last time that you have an opportunity to get out of uniform without serious consequences. And otherwise, there's like the needle-sized hole of, can you prove that you're a conscientious objector? Otherwise, like it's jail time or punishment, blah, 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 blah. So yeah, I guess that's what I would do differently. Like act on those instincts sooner, try to find some allies. If I had searched, I could have found Vets for Peace. I could have found About Face. I could have found any other people who felt the way I did, but instead I just felt super alone and just kind of wallowed in my misery.
I'm going to interject here as a moderator. I know I'm maybe not supposed to, but when I read your book, Rosa, the most frustrating thing for me was it was like reading my diary. It was like, wow, how did this happen again? And I understand that feeling that you're talking about. I mean, you're thrown in a situation where you feel like you cannot quit. And if you just delay, you're playing a waiting game and hoping that the end of your contract will come before you lose your wits. And thank you for sharing that. I wondered if Kyle has conscientious objector status. Rosa is in limbo of conscientious objector status. Alan, I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about the process. I know that's not in your wheelhouse, but as the legal specialist here, if you could tell us a little bit about that process.
Thank you. So yes, I'm a lawyer and a JAG, and so I'm as I always say, I was their lawyer for the Colorado National Guard before I sued them. And I think one thing I learned about the conscientious objector process is that it's like any other bureaucratic process in the military. I think it's designed to prevent people from exercising their rights and to prevent people from getting to the. I think there are a lot of bureaucratic reasons why the military often gets the wrong outcome and then defends the wrong outcome repeatedly. So in my case, the commanding general of the Colorado Army National Guard, Brigadier General Douglas Paul, responded, defended his Gomar, his reprimand of me for peacefully protesting systemic racism by saying that Black Lives Matter protests are, quote, inherently violent. And his chief of staff, Colonel Beatty, said that Black Lives Matter protests begin peacefully and devolve into violent clashes with the police, which is not true. That most Black Lives Matter protests were incredibly peaceful, in contrast to, say the January 6th insurrection by white supremacists. And I think that that it's people like Brigadier General Douglas Paul who are perpetuating systemic racism with statements like that. And so it's really important to be able to speak out. I'm privileged enough to be able to do it from the inside, but I have the utmost respect for everyone who does go through the conscientious objector process. It's a long process. The paper, when you submit the paper, that's just the beginning. It's got to go through every level of the chain of command. It gets a legal review. I've done that legal review. It goes then to different offices, and often the outcome is fairly arbitrary because there's institutional biases against granting people conscientious objector status, just like there are institutional biases against considering someone even a whistleblower. I had every level of the Inspector General's office tell me that I did not qualify as a whistleblower, which was pretty disturbing when that's their job.
Thank you for that. I would like to briefly ask Kyle if you would tell us, you also, your comments do not represent the DoD because you're still an officer, and you have conscientious objector status. So now it's just a matter of waiting for separation, and everybody knows, hurry up and wait, right? So tell us, how are you reconciling your time now with they've said it, they've named you a conscientious objector, and how are you continuing to do what you do with this status?
Well, now that I'm kind of like in limbo and, playing the hurry up and wait game, and just like what Alan said, it's an arduous process. It's extremely long. It took me about a year and 5 months from the initiation to getting the approval from the CO review board. And so just now, I'm perfecting my parenthood. I have, 12 years, 4 deployments, been going a lot. And here I am, still young, also about to have my 3rd child. And I spend my time parenting. I spend my time doing the little things that I wish that I've done early, but I also have the privilege to do now to the fact that I'm just, like I said, waiting for my separation date. And so other than that, it's I have actually acted on my dreams and aspirations that when I once was 17 years old to be a writer, I have became an author of my first book that came out during Juneteenth. I have also started my own podcast. I've also wrote articles for various, one for the Center of Conscience and War, which I don't think they published yet, but I give a quick nudge to see where we can go with that. And I'm also teaming up with the Civilian Medical Resources Network, CMRN. They're a nonprofit, and they support active duty soldiers and veterans who, for anything mental health and physical health related. So it's a great way for any unmet needs to address those unmet needs through the VA or through TRICARE, through the DoD. And so I've been working with them, working as a coordinator for the last 2-3 months. And so, yeah, I mean, that's keeping myself busy. I'm keeping myself and therapy. That's also, I'll throw that in there. I'm still actively going to therapy at least once a week. And so that's how I'm kind of maintaining my sanity, using my time wisely, channeling my efforts, channeling my energy, this new, this moral and spiritual transformation I've been going through these last 3 years, and using it to channel in the right direction to kind of support and help people. So that's pretty much what I've been doing day to day, week to week, and month to month.
Thank you. I have some more questions of my own, but we got some questions coming in from the audience. So I would like, and some of them have been directed to each of the individual panelists. Thank you for multitasking and answering those things. One of the questions I see is, how do you feel your experiences in service can best be shared with prospective recruits? Is it hard to navigate making your story relatable to those that are subject to the poverty and economic draft, like abusive home, lack of options, and positive reinforcement of propaganda by a militarized civilian culture? So if you're talking to young people and there's the reality of, I'm in a bad circumstance, and then they're getting hit with this information that says, this is great, be all you can be, fun travel adventure, right? What do you have to say to younger people or prospective recruits?
I do some truth and recruitment in the schools, and I worry about that every single time I walk into a classroom, and I'm like, would I have been able to convince the 17-year-old me not to take that opportunity to get 75% of my college tuition paid for? Like, I don't know. And so I tell them that point blank, I wish I had a speaker like this come talk to me when I was a teen. Just if I could have gotten the gears turning a little bit more, encourage them to talk to other service members. But really, if they could do one thing, it's the 16-minute mini documentary that was made a few years ago. It's called Before You Enlist, with an exclamation mark at the end. It's on Vimeo. It's free. It's meant to be watched by anybody, teens, parents, mentors, anybody. It is 16 minutes that will totally rock your world and change your perspective, because it has a vast array of veterans speaking to specific issues and kind of debunking every single promise that recruiters will throw at you. So if you know someone considering military service, please have them watch it. It's only 16 minutes.
Jen Budd, I'm in Texas and I don't have a lot of prospects, and the Border Patrol's hiring. What do I do?
Yeah, unfortunately, the Border Patrol, they've adopted a lot of the military's ideas about going to schools. They even go to pre-kindergarten schools, if you can believe that, and kindergartens, and they put little miniature bulletproof vests on them and have them look at their dogs, and they do the horse and pony show. And unfortunately, it's always the schools that are mostly predominantly brown, of course, and a lot of the students, a lot of times their parents may be undocumented and so forth. And they were doing that not as much when I was an agent, but they They do it more now, but they were doing it a little bit, and they knew what they were doing. They flat out said, management knows that, hey, it's hard to hate us when your kids love us. And that's the goal. And they offer a $10,000 signing bonus, which is something that I never heard of. And they start at like over 50,000 a year. So if you're in Texas and you don't have a lot of opportunities, the one thing you do see is the Border Patrol agents. They're the ones with the nice trucks. They got the guns, they got the badges, they got either respect or fear, which and a lot of people think that's the same thing. And and I tell them the realities of it, especially as a woman. There's still less than 5% females in the Border Patrol as far as Border Patrol agents. They're starting to include processing officers, but those are not Border Patrol agents. They don't go through the same training as Border Patrol agents. And that's what the Border Patrol decided to do to tell women they should join, is that they put Chief Gloria Chavez, who's the only female chief out there, and said, this is great for women to join, come and join it. And she neglected to say that her husband, who's an assistant chief, is currently on trial for raping a female agent. So, I tell people just not to do it, to just, if you're a woman, you not that all women in the Border Patrol get raped by fellow agents, but they definitely get sexually harassed at the very least, if not assaulted. So, and it's covered up through the EEO system, and the federal government knows it, everybody knows about it, and nobody's willing to do anything about it. So, and then the corruption on the other side. It's you don't get promoted into management without being corrupt. The entire Border Patrol is so corrupt that it's not even funny. It's just scary. At least an agent is arrested like almost every day. That's how many agents are committing crimes and stuff. So I tell them not to try and find something else. So.
Thank you for that. I wanted to say I have another question. It's directed to Kyle. Someone says, since you come from a military family, what do they think of your CO filing? And I hope to see many books from you well into the future.
That's a good question. When I initially was battling the notion of being a conscientious objector, before I even contacted the Center of Conscience and War, and I was questioning this misery, this dread, this gut-wrenching feeling that that has been, tormenting me and torturing me. I kind of remember considering conscious objection, and I was like, no, deployed so many times, not looking at the definition, not looking at how the DOD or even the US government defines it, not even looking at the CCW website. Once I was able to identify that I was a conscious objector or potential, until I was convinced, until not convinced, but I shared my story with Maria from CCW, and she gave me her ear and warmth and compassion. And at the end of my story, about an hour, she said, Kyle, I just want to tell you that you meet the criteria of a conscious objector. And so when I found that out, and I started going through the motions of going through this arduous process, I didn't want to tell my family. I was the golden child in my family. I come from a very low socioeconomic family. I mentioned those three individuals who served, but those are the only ones who served. But they've had tremendous impact on just how I think about the military, what I thought about the military, and also my service as well. And so when I was going through, I didn't want to tell them because I became the first officer in our family. And when I became a warrant officer, in my family, they know me as Chief. They call me Chief. You know, my uncle who's still here with us today, who served in Vietnam. He always wants to he takes me to the VFW and he's very braggadocious. And I have my other uncle who served in the Air Force, who's also very braggadocious. My mother, who I'm her shiny object. And I started thinking to myself, I said, if I tell them this, I no longer, and I become an outsider to the military power structure, what would they think of me? Will I still be this Kyle that they adore? And then I thought about my grandfather who passed away when I was 5. And I'm big on doing my ancestors proud. I said, what would he think of me? My brother who served, who I look up to him, I said, what would he think of me? Will I still be the man that he is proud of, and he considers, who's doing a great job, who's moving forward in the right direction, and all these things were playing. And so I kept it from them for a while. I didn't tell anyone until top of this year. January, February timeframe. It got to a point to where I got tired of every single time I'm calling them, and they're asking me, they're calling me Chief. They're asking me about the base. They're asking me about Russia and the Ukraine. And so I kind of want to get to a point to where I wanted them to start looking at me as the person that I have transformed to. I'm the husband, I'm the father, I'm the writer, I'm a spiritual entity. That's what I am now. And I kind of wanted them to start looking at me in that direction, because when you get misidentified over and over and over again, it really, it didn't upset me, but it bothered me. And so I finally told them this year, right before I got the results back, I finally broke down and I told them. They actually accepted it. They actually accepted it. I went through all of this ruminating and second guessing, and they all told me, we know that if this is something that is very dear to you, that this is something that's been eating you up, and this is something that you have thought about in its entirety. And so that right there made me feel understood. And it also made me feel kind of, why did I wait so long? I didn't just break this down, but I'm kind of glad that I did, because that feeling that I got, that feeling of, I am still loved. I am something outside of the uniform. I'm something outside of the warrant officer rank. And so finally told them, and no one tried to convince me otherwise. I've had a few family members say, oh, well, you're at 12 years, you got 8 years more. And I'm like, time is the most precious commodity. I don't want to just give my 8 years. It's a long time for anyone to give anything to an institution or to an organization if they no longer align with. And so, but the ones that mattered to me and my family accepted me, showed me love, told me, hey, if you ever want to talk about it, we may not understand it in its entirety, but we will listen. And so, sorry if this was long-winded, but I literally just went through this just a few months ago. So very good question. Whoever asked that question, thank you so much for getting me to open up about that.
Thank you for sharing with us about that. I remember I didn't put in a CO application. It was too late for me. When I was activated, I went AWOL, and it was very public, and it was very frightening. It's like hindsight being 2020. I'm glad I didn't really understand the full consequences of what I was going through at the time, because I wouldn't have done it. I remember that the only person whose opinions I cared about were my two grandfathers. One had been a Marine and one had been in infantry, both World War II. And they were the only two people that when I came home and said, hey, I enlisted, that were pissed. They were angry. They wondered how this happened. Who took her to get enlisted? And those were the people whose opinion mattered to me most because they knew what was going on. I want to redirect a question to Alan about what is the best way to reach out to active duty military with appeals to conscience or just connecting with active duty. And we're all being thanked for our honesty and candor, by the way. So know that you're loved by the folks in TV land. Alan?
Well, thank you. I can't speak completely to the active duty experience because I've always enjoyed being a part-time member of the Guard and then the Army Reserve, which means I do have more rights than some of the active duty members. Is that fair? I don't think so. I don't think you should give up any constitutional rights, especially when the first thing everybody in the military does is swear an oath to preserve and protect the Constitution of the United States. That said, I have deployed to the Middle East, and I do understand, and I do understand the hardship that comes with that, both for those deploying and for the families at home. And there are a lot of things that happen that are not okay. So when I came home and was released from active duty, I wrote, I participated in a video op-ed in the New York Times that made the front page of the New York Times, criticizing some decisions made by President Trump. And even active duty members of the military have the right to write letters to the editor. And so you're not alone. You're not even completely cut off from the world. You can, there's always an outlet to get your voices out there. And so that would be, I think, my message for those who are serving. And I'm happy to be a resource, on that. Yeah, I wish I could. I don't have a magic way to reach everyone serving. But I think that the more people that are not afraid to stand up for what they believe in, I think we just need to instill that in everyone.
I would like to say that one of the ways that some Veterans for Peace connect with active duty is the Gamers for Peace initiative. We're able to connect with people by playing games. Okay. And that doesn't put them at a huge amount of risk because they can log in and play games and participate in our chat and connect with us in a way that works for their time slot. I personally, when I go to schools to do truth and recruiting visits, the first person I introduce myself to after the principal of the school is the recruiter that I'm going to be working with. Hello, Sergeant so-and-so. My name is Stephanie Atkinson. I anticipate we're going to see a lot of each other over the coming school year. Let's have lunch. By the way, you should join Veterans for Peace. The fees are waived for active duty members, and that's just where I start. The difference between one person I talked to, a recruiter, he's like, I'm 12 years in. He's like, I plan to do 8 more. And I said, well, how many times have you been deployed? And he said, none. And that right there tells me that might be the tipping point between who is a resistor and who isn't. Like, he could be a resistor. All it takes is a deployment. I have a question here from someone. Oh, the National Guard recently came under scrutiny for a unit's behavior while deployed to the border in support of the Border Patrol. Is there a large amount of crossover from Border Patrol agents also serving in the National Guard units, which further influences the soldiers towards acting on an underlying racist bias? How do we interrupt or intervene in that pipeline of people, soldiers becoming Border Patrol agents, becoming cops, that militarized, just hanging on to that identity and making it a lifestyle, a career?
I think we have to get back to civilian policing. I mean, what we have right now is we have even just small towns are running around, cops are running around looking like, like they're in a war or something like that. Part of what the Border Patrol recruits very heavily from the military. And they've even gone so far as like they've adopted their terminology. I think the military, you call your things tours or tour of duty. In the Border Patrol, we always called it a detail, but now they call it tour of duty. They wear camouflage. There's no reason for a Border Patrol agent to wear camouflage. It's just ridiculous. And all the gear that they carry, they act like they're going into a war zone. Now, that's not to say that there isn't danger on the border. There can be danger on the border, but for the most part, being a Border Patrol agent is one of the safest law enforcement jobs you can get. The majority of Border Patrol agents have died from COVID. They're not dying because migrants are attacking them. They need to be more of a humanitarian organization. And I just think, one of the things is we have to stop looking at our own people as if they are the enemy. And that's what I feel like we're doing when we bring many military into the civilian law enforcement side. And we continue that militaristic training without saying, okay, wait a minute, things are different here. When you're policing civilians and you have the US Constitution and all these other things, it's not the same. And what we've seen is our police are just going more towards the military and treating American citizens as if they were enemy combatants.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Someone else has asked a question here. Serving in the Navy in the 1960s, I realized there was ingrained systemic racism in the senior officer ranks that discriminated against minorities. Do the panelists think anything has changed? Systemic racism in the military in 50 years.
I mean, our entire government and everything we've done, right? Haven't we realized this is based on racism? I mean, the Border Patrol is like, we're not racist. Over half of our agents are Hispanic. And it's like, yeah, but you guys are racist. You can be, the system is racist and stuff. So I don't think much has changed. And I think that's what we're facing now, is the fact that if we don't talk about our racist past, if we don't talk about the systemicness and what we've created and everything, we're just going to keep on the same path over and over and over again. So.
And I would just add to that, I agree completely. And I think that systemic racism, like systemic sexism, both of which exist, are rampant in the military. That doesn't fix itself. The institutions don't fix themselves. So there are a lot of ways we can fix it. Whether it's voting, whether it's becoming more politically involved, whether it's protesting in the streets. These are how we have to force these institutions to change.
I have another question for all of us. What do you think? Oh, what did you think when the enlistment contract asked if you were a conscientious objector? Does anybody remember that?
I remember that. And at that point, I certainly wasn't, because I was 17 and it was before 9/11, had no idea, what was going to happen and everything. And I had, you can't join as a CO, right? And that's what you have to prove. That's what's so hard to prove. Like, okay, well, prove that your heart and mind changed between this point and this point in your life, and how and why, and who's going to back you up, even though we're going to try to dig up dirt on you and make you look like a total cowardly asshole. Yeah, I remember that question. Every 17-year-old kid is like, well, how could I be a conscientious objector and sign up for the military? It's like one of those foils, like, but we asked you at the beginning that, and you said you weren't. So, it's like kind of like, well, gotcha moment.
Yeah, the enlistment contract is the size of a phone book, and you're just, you're tired, you're in there by yourself, initial here, initial here, initial here, initial here, and it's like, you don't know what the hell you're signing. I find it ironic that I could not vote, not buy a beer. I couldn't even get like credit. Like if I wanted to buy something on layaway, forget that. But man, I'll take your life. I'll take your life, your young ambition, your ignorance, your good intentions, and I will take all of that and break it all down and make you a soldier. So I remember the question, are you a communist? And I kind of wanted to check that because I thought it was funny. I just thought it was a silly question, and I thought, what happens if I check this? But really, nobody remembers those details. And as you said, it's a gotcha. It's like, well, we asked you and you said no. So let's see what other questions we have.
We're actually reaching a point where we need to wrap up, Steph.
Thank you very kindly.
Of
I
course.
want to say, because I lost track of time, that the biggest question is what can we do to support y'all? Thank you, Jules.
Great closing question, Stephanie. I wanted to know the answer to this one too.
Lots of people are asking, what can they do to support y'all? Thank you.
Share our stories, follow us on social media. These guys have social media accounts and so forth, and support resistors and people who conscientiously object, and whistleblowers as well.
Before I go, I want to say that I would like to dedicate this panel that we just had to our friend who's still in jail, and that's Daniel Hale. Please write to him, the whistleblower who's still incarcerated. If you have any questions, stand with Daniel Hale, I believe it's .org. So the biggest whistleblower who is not here right now because he's incarcerated in Marion Federal Penitentiary. Kyle, or excuse me, Daniel, we're thinking about you. Thank you, everyone who's participated today, and y'all are my heroes. Peace.